Welcome back. Today we're going to work on one of the most important aspects of the home remote. We're going to connect our receiver to the home remote using the native functionality built in, which will be communicating over the network. Now the home remote has some built-in plugins that work directly with Yamaha, Pioneer, Onkyo, the big names in receivers. However, there are some off-brands that use these same protocols as well. The importance of connecting a receiver using this method cannot be overstated. We could use IR commands to communicate with our receiver. That would be mimicking exactly what the remote does. For example, we could do a volume up command or a volume down command or maybe power toggle. However, when we connect using the built-in functionality, we're actually able to receive feedback from the device, which lets us know the current status. This is really important for things like power, where do we need to turn the device on? Well, first we need to determine if the device is already on. Otherwise, a power toggle command may turn the device off inadvertently. Similarly, with volume commands, it would be great if we could already know what the current status of the volume is. And that's just simply not possible with IR commands. IR commands are one-way communication, and this is much more similar to a serial connection where you're sending a command and then receiving feedback for that command. Now, before we started using this system in my house, what we do previously is we'd use most things, we just use the Vizio remote. But then if you wanted to actually switch the inputs on the TV or especially adjust the volume, you'd need to utilize the receiver's remote or actually get off the couch, go over and turn the knob on the receiver, which is totally out of the question. Now, using the regular receiver remote, we can only make small volume adjustments by either clicking the volume up or down or maybe holding them down to repetitively fire that same IR command. Now, if you walk over to the receiver, you can manually adjust the volume by turning that big knob on it. I want to have that same fast volume adjustment capability utilizing the home remote, and to do that I'm going to use the slider control that we placed down at the bottom previously. But first we've got some legwork to do. To get started adding our receiver, I'm going to come over here to Devices and just right click, choose Add Source, and go down to Onkyo, which happens to be the brand of my device. It's going to work very similar for Pioneer and Yamaha as well. I'm going to click once and it's going to bring up the dialog to ask if it's okay to search for new devices. What this is going to do behind the scenes is a UDP port scan on your network to locate any devices that might be listening on the appropriate ports for those type of commands. Now, if this is the first time you're using the Home Remote Designer to do a port scan like this, it's very likely that you're going to get a Windows firewall prompt at this point. I've already done a port scan similar to this on this computer before. If you didn't, however, you need to go ahead and click Allow on that first. Now we're going to click OK to search for new devices, and very quickly the home remote will find and appropriately name my device. Here you can see it's shown up. I have a model TXNR636, and within this model you'll see I have two devices within it. What this is my receiver is built with two separate zones that can be controlled from the same device. What this is used for in the real world is if maybe you had a couple of patio speakers or a couple of speakers in another room or an entire different automation system based on another zone that you want to control separately from your main zone. You can pipe different media input outputs to that zone, as well as it also has its own separate volume control. However, in my setup, since this room just has its own dedicated 7.1 surround sound system, I don't use the second zone at all. Instead, all of my commands, regardless if it's media or volume or whatever, are all going to go through this main first zone instead. In this case, it's pre-named it TXNR636. Now the Home Remote Designer is so smart that it already has figured out what type of capabilities are going to be supported with this device and listed them over there. If you're interested in what the commands are behind these capabilities, what you'll need to do is actually head on over to the forums, and currently this location is in the Device Objects sticky post here called Device Objects. Click once on that, making sure that we are on page 1. And then down here at the bottom, we'll track all of those different capabilities. To keep things simple, I'm going to go ahead and rename this first zone so that it looks just like the second zone. That way there's no confusion in the future, as we have the source as the same as well. So I've got now zone 1 and zone 2. I changed that over here under properties and name. Now a first good rule of thumb is to always run the simulator first so that you know what the expected outcome is before you make any modifications. Let's do that now and run the simulator. You can see that our volume control slider with no variable inputs is stuck over here on the left hand side. We can physically move it and it will stay where we put it, but we know that it's not actually communicating with the receiver. We'll stop the simulator now, and it's time to attach our device object to this control. We'll click on the slider over here in the outline, and then under Properties, Common, and Value, we'll click the ellipses here and choose a device binding. We'll click on the drop down and scroll down until we see TXNR636.volume. This is the device object that controls the volume on the receiver. We'll choose OK here, and that's basically it. The home remote is doing all of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. It's getting the current volume control, volume value from the receiver. It's storing that and updating the slider control, and then when we make adjustments to the slider control, it's then sending that as an integer. It's converting it back into whatever format this receiver is using and making that adjustment. It's time to run and test. Click Start now, and we'll see immediately that the volume value has adjusted automatically to whatever I currently have the receiver set to. If I move the slider down or up, I'm actually making physical adjustments to the receiver behind me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get up and walk over to the receiver and manually turn the dial so that you can watch on my screen as the home remote automatically picks up those adjustments. So you can see that the volume control was moving automatically, and that's because the home remote is constantly pinging the receiver to get the most up-to-date information for volume control and all of the other device objects. Now with the simulator stopped, what we want to do is talk about the slider control a little bit more. If we click on it over in the Properties window, we can see that it has a minimum and a maximum value here. 0 to 100 is going to be the default, and if you're using one of the built-in integrations for receiver, it's going to automatically convert whatever the volume control is down to this range. Now on my receiver, I can actually go to negative decibels and positive decibels, but behind the scenes, the home remote is doing some additional calculations there to work with those numbers and get them so that they're still down to a 0 to 100 scale with one tick in between, and it's doing all of that automatically. If we were using some sort of custom integration here, we may need to adjust these values so that our slider control works appropriately. Now there is a lot more that we can accomplish using the built-in integration with the receiver over the network, and we can modify the mute commands, that's a good one, maybe power, as well as being able to adjust the volume value discreetly. And I hope to cover all of those in a different video, but for just the most simple implementation, this one should get you going whether you have an Onkyo, a Pioneer, or a Yamaha receiver. That's all for this one.